Distracted. Okay. Um, I'm excited to welcome him back to the Craft podcast. It's been a long time since we heard from our traveling man, Right Worshipful Anthony Prizzia. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
So the funny
It's
thing
a little
is
while, but
he's
I'm
got
glad
a Right
I'm finally
Worshipful.
in one spot for a few minutes.
Yes. He's a tough guy to get to stand still. If you follow him on Instagram, I've said this out loud to you, and I've even posted it on your account. Like, I want to live your life with all of the traveling that you do, both professionally and just personally. And that's kind of the subject of this podcast. Is you had gone over to England and wrote a really nice traveling man blog article for us at craftsmanonline.com on your experiences at the Metropolitan Grand Lodge. Why don't we start there? Was this a family trip, or were you jet setting, or what was going on?
Originally, it was for work, and I changed jobs in between this trip happening. So I won a contest that I was supposed to go, but when I changed jobs, obviously that contest, but I already had the airline booked, non-refundable. So I didn't want the tickets to go to waste. So I grabbed my daughter and my girlfriend, and we said we're going to take a little trip to go see London. And I wanted to let them see the Grand Lodge. I want them to see a few Masonic events when we're traveling, just for them to see a little more of what I do with behind the scenes here.
So let's get
that
some
was the start of it.
The American tourist questions out of the way. What's it like driving on the other side of the road?
God awful. So I wasn't supposed to drive. I was going to take a train, but then the train ticket was extremely expensive to come from Manchester to London. And I rented a car that was stick shift on the wrong side of the car. So I'm shifting with my left hand and I'm on the wrong side of the road. So that was very, very challenging to say the least. And the hardest part, I think, as being a New Yorker, is you can't speed because there's cameras every so many half mile or a quarter mile. And if you speed in between those cameras, you automatically get the ticket. It's you can't fight it. There's nothing. It's just you have to be really cognizant of your speed and watching those cameras because you didn't want to turn a $200 or $300 rental car into a $600 or $700 fine plus the rental car.
All right,
that was the most challenging part, I think, of everything.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a heavy foot, and if I do get a chance to visit England, I will let somebody else do the driving, because that would be, I'm sitting here in my head going, I don't know if I could do left hand, left shift. That would be so weird.
It was, I mean, I got used to it, but yeah, it was just, making sure. And some of the roads, if you're on a highway, it's very easy, because everyone's traveling in the same direction. But when you get on the smaller roads or on those side roads, smaller towns, it was hard to tell which roads were one way and which roads were two ways, because people park any which way they want. And people park strange, and there's no real parking rules. So you really had to be on your toes, because you could get yourself into trouble really fast, one on the wrong side, or you could even, pedestrians, because you're looking for them on one side and then you're not expecting them to cross the road. And it was very challenging for the first time. Yeah.
So I'm hoping that brothers that are listening to our podcast that are New York Masons have had the honor of visiting the Grand Lodge of New York. I'm very proud every time I get to walk in there. I love that building. It's just got so much history, the prestige that's there. It's a beautiful building in Manhattan. It's also open to the public if you just have a casual interest in Freemasonry and you want to take a tour of a Grand Lodge building. I couldn't suggest a better one. Anthony, you've got the title Traveling Man for us here at Craftsman Online. What other Grand Lodges have you visited, and what were your experiences there?
I've been really fortunate. Due to my work being in the wine world and traveling all over for wine, I always kind of make it a point, if I'm in a city or a different state or a different country, I always try to find the Grand Lodge. I always try to find an open lodge that I could go and sit and participate in a meeting. I was one was really hard to find, but it was in Italy. I drove all around the Grand Lodge of Italy. It was in Rome, just outside, and I couldn't get in. It was completely locked up. No one was around. All I got to see was the outside. But then other times, I've had some really fun experiences where, Tennessee Grand Lodge, got a private tour by a past Grand Master who just happened to be in the building. And then the same exact thing happened when I was in Georgia right before lockdown. I was there 2 weeks before COVID just locked everything down and there was no flies. And I got a private tour from one of the past grandmasters, and gave me a behind the scenes tour of the Georgia Grand Lodge right there in Atlanta, Georgia, which was really, really fun. And then, like our Grand Lodge, the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania is also open to the public, and they have regular tours. Another one that's not far away, especially for brothers in New York. It's easy to get to Philly, and I highly recommend checking that out. There's some amazing historical artifacts and a lot of just rich history, and they have like a real actual tour with a tour guide, which is really fun.
Unless you're Anthony and you get a private tour from a past grandmaster.
And then there's like even tiny ones. Like I've been to the tiniest lodge, the Grand Lodge I've ever been to, was like in Maine and Rhode Island. Both those lodges are tiny, the Grand Lodges, but they're really fun, and you get like this personal kind of experience. And I always try to pick up a little memorabilia. They're always usually selling like a challenge coin or a pin or something. So I always try to bring home some for for the brothers here, and make sure I bring a little thing. So yeah, it's fun. I recommend anybody, if you've been to our Grand Lodge, get out there and really just see some of the other ones, so you can really appreciate it, some of the similarities and some of the things that New York does do in a very grand way.
So we got a good reference point on where you are with your Grand Lodge travels. And the subject for your blog was getting to go inside and visit the Metropolitan Grand Lodge. Did you show up? Were you lucky to get a past Grand Master that gave you a tour? Were you a visiting brother? Were you there for a meeting, or did you just walk in off the street?
We just walked up the street. It's actually my second visit there. I went once with a friend a few years back for the same trip that I won for my past company I was working for. And it's very high security. The Grand Lodge, Metropolitan Grand Lodge of England, is extremely tight security. You can't even take pictures in the vestibule. I did by accident, and they made me delete them. They're afraid of bad actors. So in Europe, just like the Grand Lodge was closed in Italy, and it's very difficult. Europe is very, very tight with their security. They take everything very, very serious. But when you do get past security, you can go and get a guided tour with an audio, which is awesome. I highly recommend that, because it gives you in-depth history about all the artifacts. It walks you through step by step every portion of the museum, and it's a really, really informative, to say the least. So I would definitely recommend doing that if you're ever in England and see that part of the. Because you get the full picture of the Grand Lodge. And I say full, you're only really seeing about 2/3 of the building. 1/3 is really still hidden just for the members of that Grand Lodge, or members of the Grand Lodge of England. Even for me as a traveling, right worshipful, I was not allowed access without someone vouching for me or to get me behind the scenes, and there was no one there that was willing to do it that day. So still 1/3 is a mystery to me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's add that to the to-do list. What made you decide to go visit this Grand Lodge? I know that there's a lot of Masonic landmarks and historical places in London. What made you narrow in on the Metropolitan Grand Lodge?
Well, it's an impressive building, to say the least. I mean, it's almost a full city block, kind of it's giant, and it has a couple little really fun features. Like right next door, not even a block away, is the Freemasons pub, which is a spot where a lot of Freemasons will travel, and they'll have a little something, a little snack, and they'll have a drink at the Freemason pub, which is right down the street from the Grand Lodge. But this one has some interesting things, because it actually has a real pub right in it. And when you're either before your tour or after your tour, you can go have a pint or a very nice selection of single malts and some whiskeys right in the lodge. And you'll see brothers from all over sitting in these nice, beautiful chairs and all hanging out and either conducting business or just talking about stuff and getting to know each other. And I've found that's one of the most fun parts of my travels, is I want to get to know as many brothers as I can. I want to create these bonds and meet people I would never meet if I wasn't a Freemason, and hear some stories and share some stories. So it's really, really impressive building and very unique. To pay for the pub, they had all the lodges got together and they donated money just to create this pub within the Grand Lodge, and it is a special spot. So it did draw me to it once I realized it was there, and I think it's one of the most unique places in the world for masonry.
Anthony was drawn to a bar or a pub. I'm surprised he. Well, no, I mean, I think some of us have been fortunate if maybe your lodge has a bar or, a drinking corner per se, or are allowed to have alcohol in your hall, or your temple association, permits that. For I'm thinking my lodge here in DC, we meet at the Shriner Temple, which, surprise, surprise, does have a fully stocked bar and a bartender that's there. And it is, a Masonic building per se, but it's not a Blue Lodge. It's definitely not a Grand Lodge. I couldn't imagine, if we were to, just maybe open up something similar like this at the Grand Lodge of New York, how that would impact attendance at the Grand Lodge sessions.
Yeah. Some of us would probably be drawn to go more often than others, but yes, it was unique because I've never been to a Grand Lodge or a building that big where it had just itself was the most lodge rooms that I've ever been in. So it was pretty impressive.
Well, let's talk a little bit about going into the lodge. I mean, we could spend a whole episode with drinks talking about the pub and the conversations there, but the rooms in the buildings that you did get to see, kind of comparing it to the Grand Lodge of New York, is it just a giant building that has a bunch of different lodge rooms, or are there just a couple in particular?
Yeah, it's very similar to how our Grand Lodge is set up. So you have one main one where you have all your large scale events. And then you have the spot where it also can be used in a lot of ones, like the Grand Lodge of Tennessee had this hall where they had concerts and stuff. So it was similar to that kind of amphitheater feel in the big main room. Not as, I don't think it could hold as many as our Grand Lodge held as far as actual numbers, but it was you could see how old the building was and how historic it was. But it did have little smaller lodge rooms that where some brothers would meet from different lodges and even some different concordant bodies. So it did have a very similar feel, and where it had a library on one side that was very impressive, and then it had this multiple museum rooms with history and artifacts. So it felt very similar-ish to our Grand Lodge in New York, just much, much older. Obviously,
you'd kind of touched on this earlier. You
definitely,
said
if I was going to say, probably closer. Yeah, sorry, I was probably closer to the Philadelphia Grand Lodge because that has that historic, that the more outside the facade of the building is extremely old. So it felt more like that.
Okay. And you kind of touched on this earlier. You got a chance to see about 2/3 of it. So a third is kind of closed or hidden from the public. And you did a great job of kind of talking about the parts that you did get to see. I'm just curious about the parts that you didn't get to see. I know you were really good at getting up and getting answers out of people. Did you get any insight as to what is hidden and why they do have to keep it private?
I think it was really all about just their own, again, securities. Huge. If you walk along the stairs, there's everything was ID badge to get into the different areas, and your visitor ID badge would get you into certain rooms, but would not get you into other places. But if you even took 4 steps up the wrong hallway, you were automatically redirected by security.
Gotcha. Okay.
So they were very, very close. And I think it was more about the point is these small lodge rooms, I think were supposed to be personal and intimate for the people that were the brothers of those specific lodges. So I didn't take offense by any means by it. It's similar to when you go to the Masonic Memorial in Alexandria. There are certain rooms you can look in the window, you can see a little bit into a room, but then unless you're in an open lodge, you can't see certain parts of that building because they're there just for the brothers that are going to be engaging in Masonic work. So I think it's very similar to that as well.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and that's also another place that we should get a talk about, because I have been fortunate enough to make friends with some of the tour guides at the George Washington National Masonic Museum in Alexandria, and they've taken us and done the stop on the tour that they don't do anymore, which is the York Rite floor, where there's the commandery, and you get to see all of the neat stuff that's there as well. And you're like, wow, it's a very tiny little chapel, but very special. So back to the Metropolitan Grand Lodge. When I hear the term grand, and that's what the capital G Grand, I think of like big, beautiful rooms, as you talked about. The Grand Lodge in New York, we have that giant room that has the top of the ceiling. I love to tell new brothers it's their first time visiting there. I'm like, look up, the other one of these. There's a carbon copy, and it's on the bottom floor of the ocean in the Titanic. Couldn't get more ornate with some of our furniture and furnishings. You shared some photos from your tour of the Metropolitan Grand Lodge building in your article on craftsmanonline.com. Were there any particular areas or objects that caught your interest that maybe you weren't able to capture with your camera?
Like when you first go into the museum area, or you can see like there's like chairs and ornate furniture that past Grand Masters of the Grand Lodge of England utilize, that are encased in glass. And so like there's impressive pieces of like architecture and just craftsmanship from all around the world. And then there's like these gifts that were given from one Grand Lodge to the other, and you could see these giant all encrusted silver and gold like platters and service trays. It was, it's hard to say what was your favorite, because there's just, everything was just so impressive all the way around. And they had things from almost every concordant body there as well. So you were in awe, just keep one after the other, just kept impressing you more and more and more. So.
No, I'm guessing that the entire trip for you to go there, it was a trip you won through a previous employer, so congratulations on that. And I would love to do an all expenses paid trip to London, England. That'd be fantastic. What other things did you do on this trip? Was it all Masonic, or did you have some fun?
No, it was funny. It was my my daughter and my girlfriend's first time in England, so we did. I like to balance it out. So we did the eye, so we went up on the eye, which was really cool. I didn't even realize how cool that experience was going to be. The viewpoint was just amazing. But we also got to go to Stonehenge and learn all about how, or maybe some of the theories of how those stones were erected and put, and why they were there. So we did a lot of history. I went to the actual Museum of London. Which our friends always joke about it being the world's largest building of stolen artifacts, because it was mostly things that they took during their conquers of across the world. When they conquered another land, or they would take some of those things back. So we got to see that for a little bit, and then there was one other really interesting Masonic, I'd say, stopping point for us, because and especially us being from New York, there's an obelisk called Cleopatra's Needle, which is two identical obelisks that were actually given. One was given to the United States, so one was given to England from Egypt. And those are two identical obelisks. That one's right there in London, and the other one is in Central Park in Manhattan. And the only reason why we know these have a little bit of a tie back to Masonry is at the time, the admiral that was in charge of the moving this giant obelisk from Egypt, when they were unearthing the pedestal that it was sitting on, all the tools of Masonry were hidden and buried underneath the pedestal that this 2,000-year-old BC obelisk was resting upon.
That is so cool.
We know that some sort of operative Masons left those artifacts there on purpose. They were encased and put there specifically, so if someone ever found them, this was going their way of deeming this was a Masonic structure or artwork that was created. So it does give most people will say that yes, Masonry does have some proof that we were around 2,000 years, BC. So
Yeah,
it's an interesting little fun piece, and it's a nice little stopping point. So we did get a chance to go there, take some pictures as well. So
that is cool.
it's fun.
And it's definitely something, depending on which one's closer to you, Cleopatra's Needle, either in London or in New York City. I liked making it a part of any Grand Lodge visit. When I, go down for the Grand Lodge session, I'll go through the park and go look at that. And it's just kind of unfortunate with how you think about how old that is and how weather and, what's going on with the climate changes and, the erosion, and it's starting to fade a little bit. You can definitely, some of the objects are a little harder to make out. But one picture that is just like burned into my head at the Grand Lodge in the Livingston Library is they have the parade images of when that was dropped off in New York City and all of the Masons that met at the Grand Lodge building and walked there.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. There's actually a video out there too. I know it's on YouTube somewhere, and if you can Google like the Cleopatra's Needle, it should come up. And it's just amazing documentary of how they found it. How they identified it was an artifact that has Masonic ties, and it's a really informative thing. So I definitely, anyone who's interested in Egyptology or Masonry, I think could equally benefit from checking that out.
I want to talk to you about Stonehenge, because I feel like you got a chance to see a lot of the things that for many of us we only see in TV shows or in movies. What did you think of that? What were some of the explanations, and how big are those blocks?
They're monstrous. It's huge. And what was the really interesting part is the stone how that stone doesn't exist anywhere in that area. They know where stone came from. And if you're in the room, because there's many tours that are happening all at once. And it was really funny. You could listen to one or two of the tour guides. Every single one had a different explanation or opinion how the stones got there and how they were erected. So, and ours gave up pretty plausible. It sounded reasonable to me. Was they rough cut the stones and then they moved them there when the rivers were frozen.
Okay.
Because the weight of them at the time would have been too big or too heavy for any boats that they actually had at the time. They did some kind of like, let's myth busting, if you call it, if you will. So it seemed like that was a plausible thing. And then the way they were placed, the other plausible explanation was they would use rollers, but they would move earth and then put the stones in place and then remove the earth, which again seemed pretty plausible. Or you could say and believe one of the other people that was giving a tour that it was completely done by aliens and they had technology from space and they're the ones who put them there. So it really, you could hear, again, if you stood there long enough, you could hear, I would say probably 10 different explanations or theories of why it's there, how it got there, and how they constructed it. So well, that's it was pretty interesting to hear a lot of those things.
Yeah, that's the one question I think a lot of folks have is the why, like the how and the when and what they did to get things there. That's cool, but like, why is that there?
Yeah, well, some people say it was, it's a way to tell time, or it was part of this calendar thing. It was the sun hits it at a certain time, so it was a way for him to keep where it was, ritualistic, and this is how they celebrated or worshipped with whoever they were worshiping at the time. So again, there's really no definitive. No, I don't think there's anyone that could say, oh yeah, there's like 500 people agree on one theory. I think everyone has a little bit of a different theory when I was there listening, and it was really interesting. We took a little bus tour. It takes a better part of a day. I mean, it takes a full, probably 6 hours to do the entire trip there and back, because it's very far outside of England or London. But it was really worth it. And I can't say I would recommend that. You have to do it at least once just to see it for yourself. It's extremely impressive.
So I'm thinking back to the last time you were on the podcast. We were getting ready. Your HBO premiere had happened with the the short run series, White House Plumbers, which was an award-winning series, and so congratulations for being a part of that. And so now I'm thinking, okay, Ava, who was also part of that production, 2 years older, so she's that fun teen age. What did she think of dragging along and seeing all these historic sites with Dad?
I'm lucky. I'm blessed with a very good traveler. As long as I don't let her get hangry, we're good. Every once in a while, I'll realize, I'm like, oh, we have to stop what we're doing, just immediately go get food, and then she's right back in 100%. But yeah, she's a really, really good traveler. She rolls the punches. We were walking, I would think, anywhere between 15 and like 25,000 steps a day in London. And she was a trooper. We walked, it was really far. I think it was like, I want to say it was probably like almost like 3 or 4 miles. And we walked from our hotel past the Shakespeare's Globe, which was a really cool tour as well, to the Mayflower pub for lunch, which is where the Mayflower left as it was before it came to the, but now is the United States. So like there's so many famous pubs and bars, or in historical little areas. So she was really good about seeing them, like experience the entire thing. And as long as I kept her fed, we were all in good shape.
It's like a little gremlin.
Oh yeah.
So a good travel story. I like your travel stories. My favorite one from you was when you visited a lodge in Mexico and did a lodge dinner with them that went until about 2 a.m. Which that one I think is an all-time Clubhouse leader favorite. But you have bumped up the interest in wanting to go travel and visit London. It was a place that on my thing was like, down the list. I think I'd rather go to Japan first, or France, or Italy, as you had mentioned. But now I'm thinking of it a little bit more. So if there's a listener or maybe another brother who's thinking about this, like, help us out. What are some must-see things? Or what are some to-do places we should go?
London, I just want to, I have friends and people who follow me on Instagram and Facebook. They'll send me messages all the time. Like, hey, I'm going someplace. Where am I going to go eat? Where am I going to go drink? What am I going to go see? So I do document it pretty well on my Instagram or Facebook, and also in Google. I have people that follow me on Google, and they see all the little different places I've been. But everyone has to do, like, you find out something that maybe responds to your resonates with you. Like, if you love boxing, there's a bar called The Ring, and it's almost like a boxing hall of fame. It's like a dive bar. If you love Alice in Wonderland, the pub where that was either written or parts of it were written is a whole theme, and each room has a different little area dedicated to Alice in Wonderland. There's a pub that's dedicated to Sherlock Holmes, and it's where he wrote The Hounds, the Baskervilles. So I always tell people, you figure out what you like, and then who you're traveling with. So this one was easy because my girlfriend and my daughter, they just went because I knew London pretty well. I've already been there a few times now. But I had a very good coworker, a really good friend of mine, and I said, well, what do you want to see? He goes, I just want to go and do whatever you're doing because I know you've already planned it. You've already looked up everything, and as long as we go to a pub in between each of the spots, I'll be good. So like I always tell people, you really want to start thinking about what you're looking for, because everybody's little trip is a little bit different. But I would highly recommend London. And some of the biggest surprises, people say London, the food is awful. It's some of the best food I've had in my life. In Chinatown, their Chinatown was some of the most amazing food I've ever eaten. There's restaurants that are very simplistic, where you're going in and it's really reasonable, or you could go to some place where the sushi is made in a Michelin star atmosphere with service that is like maybe like a 3-person service for every table. So I always say travel as much as you can, see stuff everyone. But I think London is by far one of the places I would recommend everyone at least go once. And it's a solid, I would say, no less than 3 days to really see London. You really need at least 3 days or more.
I thought you were going to give me a pizza slice rating, because that's what you're famous for with your movie and TV show reviews. So out of, what is it, 10 slices?
If I was gonna, no, 8 slices. There's 8 slices in New York Pie.
Yeah,
8 slices, and if it's like a perfect movie and even a little bit more, I give it 8 slices and a taco, just to be over the top. But no, London's definitely a solid 8 slice country to go to, city to see, and I think it's the history. The people are so nice. It's very clean, extremely safe, and for the most part, you can understand what everyone's saying because the accent sometimes can get a little bit rough. But I grew up watching like The Young Ones and Monty Python, so like I'm pretty good with the English accent and the slang. So, but I can't recommend visiting London anymore. It's a very special place. I love it.
Well, it gets the coveted 8 slices, so should be bumped up on everybody's order. And I think you have the wrong title. I mean, traveling man, yes, but honestly, social media influencer. You could be a jet-setting travel blogger. I think that would be the next best thing for you, but we're lucky to have you. And thanks so much for coming back on this podcast episode. Right Worshipful Anthony Prizzia, you are such a good man and such a good friend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, brother, and I hope to see you in person soon, so we can travel together for a little bit.